Hi guys, welcome back. We are talking all about inverses today and how to find them using algebra. This is the first of two videos. This one will deal all with algebra, and then in the next video we will find them graphically. So we'll look at some graphs and how to graph inverses. Okay, so I have written a function up here, and we are going to use some algebra and follow these steps to find the inverse. So the very first step I want to do is write in terms of x and y. So that basically just means replace f of x with y. You'll see why in just a second. So I'm going to write this just now as y equals 2x minus 3. If you have a problem with like maybe b as your variable or c, n, whatever it is, I would still recommend doing this and writing in terms of x and y. The next thing we're going to do is switch x and y. Now the reason we do this algebraically is because an inverse function has all the same x and y values as a regular function, but switched, they're the opposite. That's what makes it the inverse. So we are going to flip where x and y are. So I'm going to write that in a different color. So now we're going to switch those positions. So now I have something that says x equals 2y minus 3. And then the last step, solve for y. So now we're going to write it so that y is isolated again, just like the original equation. So my first step would be to add 3 to both sides of the equation. So I've got x plus 3 equals 2y. And then my last step would be to divide both sides of the equation by 2. Okay, so I've got something that says y equals x plus 3 over 2. Now we're almost done. We just like to use our function notation, and if it's an inverse, then we write something that says f to the power of negative 1x, and then we just write what the function is. So you'll notice in the original function it's f of x, and then this is the inverse function. So you just raise it to the negative 1 power. That doesn't mean that we raise this to the negative 1 power. This is just notation for an inverse function. So this is the inverse of this one. All right, so let's practice with some more examples. This one has a g of x function. So again, our first step, I just want to rewrite it so that it says y equals, and then whatever the function is. Our next step is to flip or switch x and y because an inverse function has the opposite x and y values as the original function. Negative 2y to the third plus 2. And then last step, solve for y so that we are isolating y again. So we're going to subtract 2. So I've got x minus 2 equals negative 2y to the third. Now careful here, my next step would be to divide by negative 2. And then my next step, watch closely, this is just using a little bit of algebra. I don't like having a negative denominator in math, we just like it to be in the numerator. So if I were to make the numerator negative, that just flips both the signs. So now I have negative x plus 2, and then the denominator is just positive now. So I just basically brought the negative to the numerator. Okay, and then last step, we know to undo a cube is to take the cube root. Okay, so my final answer is going to be y equals, and then we're going to write this entire value. Negative x plus 2 over 2. And then, of course, we can write it in function notation, so we would just replace this with f to the negative 1 power of x. Okay, let's try it one more time. This one has some different variables. That's okay. I'm actually going to change them to x and y just because it makes my steps a little more clear. So I'm going to write this as y equals negative 3 over x minus 2. And then when I write my final answer, I'll just switch the x back to n. So again, first step, we're going to switch these values. Negative 3 over y minus 2. We are going to add 2 to both sides of the equation. So we've got x plus 2 equals negative 3 over y. And then we're going to do a little bit of algebra here again. We're going to switch this entire value with y. So if negative 3 divided by y equals this value, we can switch these. So I'll show you what I mean. So now we can write y equals negative 3 over, and then I'm going to write this entire value. Okay, and then let's just write our final answer in function notation. Remember, this was f of n. So I'm going to write the inverse notation negative 3 over, and then remember it was n. So I'm going to write n plus 2. You don't have to switch to x while you're solving, but again, I just like to do that. It makes it a little more clean. Okay. Last thing I just wanted to show you guys, now that you know how to find the inverse, is if you are given two functions, if you can decide or figure out if one of them is the inverse of the other. So I'm going to do step by step for this one, and then I'm just going to give you the answer for that one if you want to try it on your own. Okay, so how do we test if these are inverses of each other? What we do is use composition of functions, which means that I'm going to input or substitute one function in for x into the other. If I get x as an answer for both directions, they are inverses of each other. So let me show you what that means. I'll show you the word for that. So the first thing I want to do is evaluate g of x when I substitute f of x in for x. So g of f of x. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to write this entire function, negative cube root of, and then instead of x, I'm going to write the other function. So negative x to the third. Okay, well, the cube root of negative x to the third is just going to be negative x. So I have negative x, and a negative makes a positive. So when I used a composition of functions, I got x as an answer. So I'm halfway done. If we go the other way and we also get x as an answer, then these are in fact inverses of each other. So let's go the opposite direction. Now we're going to say f of g of x. So g of x is what I'm substituting in for the variable. So I'm going to write this function right here. And then instead of x, I'm going to write the entire other function. So negative cube root of x. Okay. So first what we have is a value cubed. Okay. So this is negative cube root of x cubed. That's just going to give me negative x. And then again, a negative and a negative. That gives me positive x. So both directions would give me x as an answer. So these are inverses of each other. They are in fact inverses. Go ahead and try it with 7. The algebra is a little more difficult on this one. You can pause it, try it out, and then you will see in fact that these are not functions. So you will not get n or x, whatever way you think of it, as an answer when you do a composition of functions here. Okay, thanks so much for watching, guys. Next video is going to be on graphs and inverses. See you later, guys.